All right, Alex Jones, this is just kind of after the show. I want, because I know this was a topic that's going to take a little bit longer to unpack. You were just talking about sort of demonic apparitions and what they do in Silicon Valley. Now, here's one thing I will say. I have not had any experience with DMT or like hallucinogenic drugs. But I do know that Joe Rogan and Eddie Bravo have talked about this, and it's fascinating to me that they've talked about having shared hallucinations, which you don't really get when it's a hallucination, right? If it's in your mind, if it's just something that you're, deep there in your subconscious, your cerebellum is conjuring up, you wouldn't all see the same thing. And this is something that other people have talked about in taking these drugs. Here's kind of, and this is what I thought was very interesting, and I think there were some misconnections sometimes with you and Eddie and Joe a little bit, what specifically once the pot came out. But I did think was interesting that you were bringing up was talking about kind of this historical opening of a door. And as a Christian, I do believe this. Certainly if you're taking all kinds of hallucinogenic drugs, you're opening a door and distancing yourself from God where you might be more prone to, let's call it, demonic or evil influence. Is that a relatively accurate kind of interpretation?
That is exactly what I was trying to say. I don't take DMT. I've not taken that. I've never taken ayahuasca. And I've talked to hundreds of people. It's the total rage for like 15 years where I live in Austin. And a lot of these are doctors, they're scientists, and they go, yeah, we were down in Peru, or we were down in Costa Rica, or we were down in Belize, and there was 20 of us, there was 50 of us, there was 100 of us, and we saw the spaceship land, and the aliens walk out, and we all saw the same aliens, and they all, and I'm like, listen, but the doctor goes, this medical doctor I know, he goes, but I think that's just the chemical. And I'm like, no, dude, you don't all see the same thing. It lowers the veil the Bible talks about, where you can see, your eyes see a lot more than just visible light. They're part of your brain. Mm-hmm. And so God has given us blinders so that we can operate the third dimension and not go crazy, seeing all the other stuff going on around us in other dimensions. And so that's really what this comes down to. And San Francisco and the microdosing LSD elites and all of them, you see these CEOs on TV and they're under hot lights and you can't even see their eyes. It's nothing but pupils.
Right.
They are obsessed with this. And when I was a kid growing up, my parents had some friends that were research scientists out in San Francisco. They came to visit once. So I'm like 7, 8 years old at the dinner table hearing about government research projects where instead of trying to go into space, they're like trying to contact, and how they were having government people take huge amounts of drugs to contact the clockwork elves. So I heard about that, and I talked about it over a decade ago. People researched it and found Terrence McKenna and Timothy Leary talking about it. And basically, they look like gray aliens, except they wear little elf hats, little green outfits, and that's who you talk to at least level 1 taking the drugs. And again, I know dozens and dozens and dozens of people that go to ayahuasca and DMT cults because they're all seeing and interacting with the same thing. It might be a 200-foot tall praying mantis. It might be a giant demon. It might be a bunch of little gray aliens. Either our brains are all psychic and are sneaking up with somebody, and then one leader in the group's causing a hallucination. Maybe that's happening. Or we're breaking through and something real is happening. Biblically, you read about it, the Bible says, do not go to the sorcerers and take pharmakia. The symbol of the grinder and the bowl means drugs.
Right.
Because that's what the magicians in every culture would grind up hallucinogens, take them, and they go, the gods say build a pyramid or build an altar and throw babies into it. Whether it was the Babylonians or whether it was the earlier Egyptians, or whether it was the Druids, or whether it was the Aztecs.
Are you going to go back to the Bacchanalians, the parties that they would have? That's where debauchery comes from. A lot of people don't realize this. The term debauchery comes from the Bacchanalians, the parties that they would have, where they were drug-induced, where people would come out of a human orgy pile missing a limb. The idea that sort of low, and Joe Rogan is talking about this. This is why I did think this was an interesting topic, and I did think that maybe Joe and Eddie can't necessarily explore it as deeply since they do partake a little bit more. That's not a condemnation on their choices. I just think they may be somewhat uncomfortable with this idea. When you do lower...
And let's be clear. You read about Nero.
Yes.
And people. He would dress up like a werewolf, this is in the Roman histories, and have a kid tied up to a pole and run in with a wolf skin on his back and kill a kid. Exactly. These elites take drugs like voodoo to try to interface with something evil. So an Eddie Bravo, a Joe Rogan, they're nice guys. So they go and it's a little alien saying, I'm your friend, I'm your spirit guide, come visit me more. But people that get deeper into it, the spirit guide, just like the Bible says, leads you somewhere very, very bad. And again, why do we think aliens are going to come from space? They're going to come from another dimension. Again, I agree. They're not aliens. They've always been with us, and it's demonic. And listen, you can search engine this. We have human-animal hybrids now. We have babies that have been genetically edited. We have world government. I mean, it's all here, and I'm not saying I even have the answers. Right. All I'm saying is the establishment is obsessed with communicating via pharmakeia drugs with other entities, just like in every history book, in every culture, they always were.
Right. And I do think that's important for people to note that, listen, I know they'll say, well, Christians believe that God told them this. Okay, absolutely. But the difference is if you look at a lot of pagan cultures, and like some of the cultures that you just mentioned, they all say, well, God told me this. And usually there's some kind of a drug or chemically induced influence when you look at the great acts of evil and barbarism. Even talking
because
about
it's lower level. Exactly. It's a lower dimension. You access the devil through drugs and jacking with what God already gave us. But they know through higher levels, chemicals are released in the brain. During prayer, during emotional moments, you're higher with God. That's when you get love and grace and the universe, and it's all good. But you get into the occult, all of it's bad. None of it's good.
Right. And I know Joe and Eddie have talked about lowering your inhibitions quite a bit, even if it's just marijuana, as a good thing. And in a certain... There's a component to that I probably agree with. Sometimes people might be a little bit uptight. Listen, it's why the Bible says that wine makes for a warm heart, brings good. I don't know, good cheer, cheery spirit. I don't know. I'm very tired.
Yeah, Jesus turned the water into wine. He didn't turn it into grape juice.
Right. Yes, exactly. Well, it's very important to note, especially when you understand modern fermentation techniques that they wouldn't have had back then. The wine would have kept fermenting until someone was drinking it. But there's specifically a verse about wine makes for. I don't know the exact verse. We'll have to get Gerald back in here about it. Bringing a good cheer, a warm heart, warm spirit, but it does praise wine. And again, it wouldn't really praise wine in that sense if it were grape juice. There is a value to a...
Well, I think it's all in moderation. The point is wine doesn't make you see demons.
No, exactly. My point is there's value in a mild social lubricant that's very different from changing the way your brain functions to the point where you're not able to make the same kinds of decisions, even though wine a little bit is fine, but drunkenness would be closer.
Exactly. It's like Avatar, the movie Avatar. They believe they're taking drugs, whether it's voodoo or black magic or any of this, so that something else can come in and run you.
Right.
And that's what this is you're giving yourself over to something else, and you're being influenced by a interdimensional, off-world, spiritual, whatever you want to call it, thing that wants to kill, steal, and destroy. I mean, you read the Bible, and then you see what the experiences they have on ayahuasca and DMT. It is satanic. And so that's why, I like Joey's a nice guy. He's like, hey, you should take DMT. And I'm like, no freaking way, man. It's not even a fear-based thing. It's the losing control, and then like I'm in a damn room with a 200-foot praying mantis. I was talking to one of the crew members, and he took it about a year ago, and he was in this room with a 200-foot praying mantis for like 10 years, it felt like, telling him, submit to me.
That sounds like The Mist.
Yeah.
It sounds
absolutely terrible. It doesn't sound fun to me.
No, it doesn't sound very fun to me. I did notice you talk.